Welcome back everyone to another Beautiful Freak tutorial. Today I'm going to be making Blue Monday soaps. I have both large bars and minis to make, and they both start the same way. So I have this mold. This is a pressure mold. Basically there was a positive, like a finding or a piece of jewelry or something, and it was pushed into this sort of hard silicone rubber to create this mold. My hands are covered in mica because I was just digging around in one of the mica drawers. And this is actually a pretty good mold. It requires basically no cleanup when I pull things out of it. The only unfortunate part is that it came as a single, not as a pair, so I have to make them one at a time rather than two at a time. Spraying it with a little alcohol. This doesn't really need an injector. This can be poured directly as long as you are careful about it. And any flash that gets onto the top can easily be just pulled away when it comes out. So I need an awful lot of these to make our soaps today, and I'm going to be making 8 of them for the large bars and 18 of them for the minis. So there's an awful lot of these to make. They take about 15 minutes each to set up, so I've got my work cut out for me. This is the sterling silver soap, and when they are all done, I will be back to show the next step. Okay, moving on with the next phase of Blue Monday soaps. I've made all of the embedded pieces that I need to make, and the next step is that I have to antique them all. This is actually done really quickly, but they take a while to dry, and they're going to take especially a long time to dry today because the humidity outside is 93%. I know that sounds like it's got to be wrong, but it's not. And it's not raining, so it's just miserable humidity-wise. So nothing wants to dry and nothing wants to set up, but I'm on a time schedule, so I don't really have a whole lot of options. The way that this gets done is to paint them with a wash of black mica and alcohol. And then, just like this, just cover them in black mica and alcohol. And as soon as I get them all done, and you don't have to be neat or careful or anything, it's as long as it's in there, I'm just going to wipe down all of the pieces so that the wash comes off the high points and leaves the darker color in the deeper areas. And that's all that really needs to be done with them, but they will take some time to dry enough so that they can be picked up and moved away. And as I said, since the humidity is so high today, it might take a little longer than it normally would. Although alcohol evaporates pretty quickly on its own, nothing is evaporating today. So I'm just going to have to be a little bit patient. Not that I really have time to be patient today, I don't. But these little corner figures are enough to do all 4 large size bars and all of the minis that I need to do. So once these are done, I don't have to do anything more with these, but there's other preparatory steps before we get to anything else. So okay, so now that they've been painted, I'm just going to take a paper towel and very gently wipe them or blot them, whatever seems to work better. In this case, blotting them might work better just because this way they won't move. Blotting them is a little bit easier because they don't move as much. And just kind of get the wash off of the high points of these corner figures, and it will continue to remain in those deeper areas just like that. So you're not trying to wipe away detail, you're just trying to actually bring out detail. Generally speaking, you need to work relatively quickly on normal days when this wants to dry fast, but today it's kind of like I've got all the time in the world to do this because nothing wants to dry now. Okay. Okay. That's basically all that needs to be done. As I said, these need some time to dry because they are not dry enough to be able to pick them up safely. The soap is technically slightly damp, and so you don't want to risk damaging the molded pieces. So I'm just going to let this sit for a few minutes, and then I'm just going to take all of them. I don't want them to stick together, so I don't want to pick up the entire towel. I'm going to let these dry and go do something else, and in a few minutes I'll be able to move them away. And once these are moved, I can move on to the next step, which is trimming the thyme sprigs that we're going to need to make the soap. Okay, back again, and as you can see, I have everything supposedly laid out in order to pour these, but we're not ready to pour yet because we have to trim these thyme sprigs. Okay, this is thyme. These were fresh thyme leaves that I've dried in my freezer, and each one of these soaps gets a little sprig of thyme in the middle. But the best way to determine how big that soap needs to be is to test fit them all. So first thing I'm going to do is put all of these little silver pieces into the soap cavities, just like they were going to be anyway. And once I get them all in, I can snip sprigs so that they fit properly in the space that remains, so that I'm not fighting with sprigs that are too big. See, like that's like a perfect size. But it's really a lot easier to fit them like individually, because sometimes you have more room than others. It's it's one of those things. So I'm going to snip 9 little pieces of thyme so that they can go into the soap as an embedded botanical. And they smell really nice. I mean, there's also dried thyme that's suspended in the soap. It's held in suspension as well. Okay. It's really easy to misjudge how much room you have. You think that the room that you have is bigger than it is, so you sometimes will cut pieces that are too large. That's why I learned to test fit, because my memory of how much room I really had was not serving me well, and I would cut pieces that were just too big. So now I just test fit everything. It doesn't take a lot to make these look like they're adequately full. Okay, so all 9 of these now have thyme sprigs, and if they all have their embedded corners, and so the next part of this is to simply get started on the pouring process. The large size bars are done exactly the same way as the small ones are, so I'm going to do them in succession. And as soon as I'm done pouring these, I'm going to just move on to the larger bars. But then before I start now, I have to take everything out again, because, you know, obviously it has to be empty before I can begin. I'm going to do all of that off camera. I'm going to cut the soap, which is the most boring thing in the world, melt it down, and I will be back in time for coloring and fragrancing. Okay, it's time to pour our soap. The first thing that I'm going to do is pour a layer of Ultra Clear into each of these cavities once I stop shedding like a German Shepherd. And I'm going to spray them with alcohol first, obviously. We always do. And it's going to knock all the thyme sprigs everywhere. And as I've said many times before, the most important part of doing embedded things is that you know where all of your pieces are before you start, so you're not running around looking for pieces. So I've got some Ultra Clear. There's nothing in it, there's no color, there's no fragrance. I'm going to pour 3 of them at a time so that they don't seize up before I have a chance to embed stuff. Okay. And spray them with alcohol to get rid of surface bubbles. And then I'm going to put the corner pieces in, try to get them roughly where you want them to begin with, and put the thyme sprig right in the middle. You just you don't want to press them down all the way to the bottom, you just want to sink them enough so that they stay mostly put. As always, try to put them pretty much where you want them when you start. That's not always possible, sometimes they get away from you, but it makes things a little bit easier if you don't have to move them around, because remember that these mica pieces are painted, and the more you move them around, the more likely it is that the mica that's on top of them will bleed. And that's obviously not an effect that we're looking to have. So again, I'm just going to pour them 3 at a time to give me a little bit of time to put everything in. And I'll make the pun for Faith and say, give me the time to put the time in. Cool. Now that I've flung that thyme sprig, God knows where. Actually, I can see it. It's fine. Okay, and now time for our last 3. This one's got some surface bubbles. Cool. Alright, well I guess that one's staying there. I guess I'll do that one first. And this one's not centered, so I'm going to try to push the sprig towards the middle. Okay. Eliminate surface bubbles. And I'm going to let these set up. These need to basically be firmly embedded into the pieces before we continue. So that basically means that they need to sit here for about 7 or 8 minutes for them to get enough of a skin on them so that we can pour the rest of the soap behind them. Alright, the soap now has gotten a bit of a skin on it. Certainly thick enough to be able to continue. I've got 2 different things here. I've got Ultra Clear and I have white. And to the Ultra Clear, I'm going to add our fragrance. The reason I'm not adding fragrance to the white today is because I'm low on vanilla stabilizer, and I don't want to add any fragrance oil that's going to discolor the white. So normally it wouldn't matter. I would just add stabilizer, but I'm low on it, and I have to make several big batches of white-based soaps, like including the Devils and the Chemicals, which, whoops, see, I almost added it to the wrong thing. And one more. Okay. So to this mixture, I'm going to add about a teaspoon of dried thyme, ordinary dried thyme that you would use for food. And to both of these, I'm going to add some blue. This one is going to get a good solid 3 scoops of blue, and this one is going to get 2 scoops of blue. Now, I have added the correct amount of fragrance oil. Like, I haven't skimped on the fragrance, it's just that I didn't divide it. Normally I would divide the fragrance oil between the two colors here, but in this particular case I'm just not doing that. But it's the same amount of fragrance oil that I would have had anyway. So I'm giving this a stir. You have this nice light blue, and in this one I'm going to add some alcohol to break up mica chunks. You have this very friendly blue color. You can break up the mica chunks in here. Okay. So now that I have all these ready, all I'm going to do is gently pour them together. And I've got just enough to cap this one off, and this one too. Some of these were a little bit low. Add just a tiny bit more white to this, or light blue rather, to fill it up to the top. And then I'm going to take my chopstick and just give them a bit of a swirl. This one in the middle is very pretty. Okay, these are now done, and they just need to wait until I can move them over to the table, and then I'm going to immediately go to the large size bars. So I will be back with the large size bars as soon as I can be. Okay, back again just a few minutes later for round 2. I'm doing these in rapid succession because I, at the time of my filming this, have 16 pours left, including this one, and then I have all the labeling, so I'm going to pour 2 at a time. I've already test fit my my pieces, including my time sprigs. I did that off camera. Okay. Sort of hustle this along. Put it in there. For the other two. And the process for the big bars is exactly the same as it is for the small ones. I'm going to put the time sprig in. I'm trying to get everything in the correct place without having to move it around too much. This one's got a nice big sprig. I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to spray it with alcohol to get rid of surface bubbles. And at this point, I just need to wait for this to set up. Okay, so now that this has set up to the point where there is a bit of a skin on it. This skin is not perfectly solid. It's got a little bit of give, but it's not leaving marks really when I touch it. I'm going to try to pour these. So spraying with some alcohol. I've already fragranced and gotten the soap prepared. I'm going to start with this blue. The light blue is a lot hotter than the darker blue, so I'm pouring the the dark blue first because I don't want to cause real bad breakthrough. Because this stuff is real hot and it will eat right through that layer if I give it half a chance. Okay. And one more. Alright. I have a little bit of extra. I'm going to pour it into these to bring them all the way up to the top. As you can see, the thyme leaves want to float. I've mentioned this before. They do make something called a suspension base that's designed for suspending embedded stuff or botanicals, but there's problems with it. The way that embed base or suspension base works is it sets up almost immediately, so you have to work like crazy fast, and there's like no setup time, there's no open time with it. This one here is really pretty. There's just no open time, and that's a problem for me because I prefer to have a little more open time in order to be able to do more stuff with it. Okay, that's absolutely the max I can do with that. Because if I put in any more, because there's a slight warp on the edge from my using the mold over and over, it's going to spill all over the place. That one's really pretty. I'm going to hit it and hope it doesn't leak. Alright, I'm going to leave that alone. It's just going to be light blue on the back. Okay, we're going to live with it. I have enough to pour a few samples, which is what I'm going to do now. And I will be back for the unmolding. Okay, several hours have passed, and now these are able to come out of the mold. They've already been stamped, and we can just pop these out because silicone molds are wonderful. These are pretty. These make a really beautiful guest soap, I think. Okay, so this is fixable, but I want to talk about what just happened. I've said this many times before, but it just never happened to show you. The alcohol adheres to layers, and that sometimes if it doesn't adhere properly, they want to split at the line when they come out. This is a fixable problem, but it's something you want to avoid, because if you don't catch it right away, you could tear this in half. So all I really need to do is apply pressure, just like that, and it's fine. But as I said, if you don't catch it when you're actually pulling the soap out, you could tear that top layer right down the middle and just rip it off, and that becomes a much harder problem to fix. So what that tells me is that I need to loosen a bit more around the edges before I try to pop. As I was saying, I think that these make a beautiful, like, guest soap. I think that they're absolutely gorgeous for that purpose. Oh, nice. Okay, so these are all of our Blue Monday mini bars. I'm gonna move this lamp a little bit so that you can see them all. Well, maybe that won't work, but they are really, really pretty. I'll move this one out of the way so that you get an actual look at it. These came out beautiful. Could not have asked for better. So I'm going to set these to the side. Just like that. And I'm going to get the big bars. These bars are also ready to come out. They have been stamped and they have been loosened. They've been curing for quite a while because I took a nap, so they should come right out with no problem. Beautiful. That sound you heard was one bar falling out of the mold and landing on the floor, but it's fine. Here we go. The wacky adventures of working from home. Alright, they technically go this way, so facing you. I'll move this one actually so you can see it a bit better. So they look great. They're beautiful. They smell so good, guys. They smell so good. These are Blueberry in Thyme. It's a really easy scent to make because it's only 2 oils and it comes together really quickly. It's not a difficult pour. The only part of it that takes some time is making all of those little silver corner pieces. This one floated a little. Actually, these on this side seem all okay, and this one and this one kind of floated, but no one's going to care about it. But this just shows like why you want to try to use your chopstick or whatever to assure that they stay anchored in the spot that you want them. On the minis, they seem to have stuck a little bit better, but you know, 6 out of 8 is not bad. The thyme sprigs look beautiful. Everything looks lovely. They have beautiful patterns. It's all great. So that's pretty much it for Blue Monday, and I will be back with the next one. See you then. Rocks out.